everybody. I'm back. It's been months. I didn't get on here for a long time because, first of all, I want to apologize for the last few videos I did being a little out there, like a little kooky. I'm going to leave them up because that really happened to me where I had these visions of the future, but I'm sure they might have turned some people off, but I have a lot of supernatural stories to tell. And I just want to say, I feel like they're all from God. They're all promptings to do things or messages or visions that I think are religiously inspired. I'm not religious, but over the years, I thought I was a witch. And there's this whole thing about the Christian witch on YouTube, and I looked it up, and I didn't get it at all. But I thought, I went to my minister and I said, I'm troubled because I feel like I'm supposed to be doing something with all these visions. And what are they for? And the guidance he gave me was, well, if they're bothering you, maybe they're not from God. And that really was disturbing for a long time. I ended up stopping going to the church because I thought maybe I was a witch and I should be a witch then if I'm going to be a witch, because I wasn't going to give those gifts up. But I've come to realize they're from God. So, heading right into it. It's been a while. I'm out of practice. I decided just to launch into this tirade because I don't have really a script. I wrote a bunch of notes, but it was building inside of me. I wanted to talk about something for the longest time, and I had a hard time processing what happened to us. Hold on. I have a visitor who's knocking at the door. It's Kat. Brings me to the second point I want to make, and that is why I've switched over to this format with the earphones and the microphone for my podcast sound quality. Okay, here's Kat. I did it because of all the interruptions in our new place. Boy, our old place was noisy too. I mean, but there's a TV in the other room. There's animals coming in and out, meowing, and thank goodness this parrot is not eating my earphones yet. Please don't. They all wanted to be involved. The parrot would not leave me alone unless I brought him in here. And he either wants to sit on that light or he wants to sit on my shoulder. So you can join me. You can agree with me when I talk about things. And please don't squawk, though. You'll break my microphone sound barrier. Oh, no. And don't chew on that. I lived in hell for 10, maybe 20 years, and I didn't realize I was living in hell. I thought I was living in paradise. This is probably going to be a multi-episode. This is probably going to be a multi-episode story because I have this whole thing about when I got seduced into going to LA, and I would not give it up for the world. I feel like, first of all, people say all things work for God's purpose. That was my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. That was great. Living in paradise, meeting a millionaire, being wealthy in LA was a blast. Working in the movie studios, meeting all the movie stars that I did. I didn't meet all the movie stars. The one thing I didn't get to do is I didn't get to go for one of the Oscar ceremonies. That's the only thing I didn't get to sit in on. That's really hard to get tickets to. You have to be a nominee in order to get a ticket. And I didn't know any nominees willing to give up their tickets, so I never got a ticket to the Oscars. That's the one thing. Hey, don't eat that. What are you doing? So I thought I'd do episode about LA and the hell it's become and why it was seductive in the first place, and the weird supernatural kind of messages I got about LA and in LA, and how sneakily seductive that life was. And then I suddenly realized how bad it was and made the decision to leave, which was, 1 minute I was telling people I'll never leave LA. I love it here. And within a few days, all of a sudden I just switched and realized I had to get out of there. I made $1 million multiple times living there, and I lost $1 million a couple times. And then the second part I want to talk about is our trip, trying to move. LA did not want to give me up. LA was like, it was like hell on earth, and people trying to get out. So many people were trying to get out at the same time as me. The economy, was bad, but there's a lot of reasons why people were leaving LA. Politics, the homeless, even, I'm kind of conservative, but even my liberal friends were all leaving to other states. And I kind of had nowhere to go, but I made a decision, and I'm really glad I did. I am in God's country now. And if you ever heard the song God's Country by, I don't know people's names. The guy who judges, I don't know that show's name either. There's a song called God's Country, and it's about Oklahoma, and it's so true. But the second part I wanted to tell about is this weird sinkhole of strange enchantment in New Mexico and the strange things that happened to us there. And, I was going to call this series, I Escaped from Hell and Was Chased by Demons and almost dragged down and caught by demons. But I don't know. That's kind of negative, so I might not call it that. But I was wondering when I was in Santa Fe, is this God doing this test for me? Or is it demons trying to just destroy me and keep me from some fantastic future that awaits me? And then I realized, I feel like it could be both. It could be demons are allowed to test us, maybe. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm getting kind of religious, because I'm not a religious person normally, very religious with demons, hell, God, all that stuff. It turns a lot of people off when you bring it up. But, I've had so many supernatural things happen to me that I have to understand it. And that is a really good context to understand it in. It makes sense. So it's real. So if I want to define it as God and have faith that it is God, which I got a message it was God, so I'm pretty sure it's God. So don't think it's the devil. But anyway, I feel like they were working hand in hand, because you have evil, bad, enemy things happening to you, and God is always there, right? My friend Susan, my second mother, said, God is always there with you. He was always there with you. And I'm like, yeah, this really bad stuff kept happening, and I kept thinking, what does he want from me? Why won't he let us leave? And I kept thinking, maybe I'm supposed to do this thing. Maybe I'm supposed to go visit this church, this amazing miracle church. Or, and then I was interfered with, so I couldn't go there. And ultimately, though, what was interesting is I got out of there with almost nothing left to my name. We had to pay for the hotel and all these repairs and everything, and I basically had nothing except for faith when I left. And then I was sick, so I didn't even have my health because I got COVID, and I was like, thought I might be dying. And I just decided, with the help of my friend Katie, who said, just get in the car and drive. And anyway, a lot of story here to tell. So I guess I'll get started telling you about LA, because LA was fabulous. I left everything I had behind in Houston when I graduated from school. I had a bunch of I didn't have a lot of stuff, actually. I had a car, and I brought a couple boxes worth of my old diaries and my writings, because I felt like since I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer. And I even prayed to God, please give me something to write about. I have such a boring life. Please, dear Lord, give me an interesting life. Well, I used to stay up till midnight, light a white candle and write. And all I could write about was being bullied and not knowing what I was going to do for my future, because I was a kid, right? So I prayed that prayer, and then later in life, I had so many crazy things happen to me, and I realized that the prayer I made, people say that's an old gypsy curse. So I cursed myself into having an interesting life, maybe by my request. But I think I was always close to God, even though I was not religious, because I was always praying, like I was lighting a white candle, I wasn't like worshiping anything evil, but, I gave up everything. I wanted to go to college in LA, and my parents said no, probably because of the expense. But I took everything after I graduated from college and drove west. I had to think for a minute. Is it east or west? Drove west. Didn't have money for a hotel. Slept on the ground in the middle of nowhere. Camped. That was really dangerous. Now that I've been listening to some of these podcasts about true crime, I realize a little 20-year-old shy girl all alone, sleeping on the ground outside her car. Why did I choose to sleep on the ground? I don't even know. But I woke up and there was a herd of deer all grazing like right next to me. And the grass was really dewy and my sleeping bag was really wet. And it was so cold in the middle of Texas and all these blue bonnets. But anyway, I kept driving. And when I got close to LA, the traffic started getting real crazy. I get to this gas station at this top of this hill, and I'm filling my car up with gas. I'm looking out, and I asked the guy that was standing there, "What is that big lake over there?" Because I saw a big brown lake. The water was really brown. And then in the middle of the lake was an island with these skyscrapers sticking out of it. And I didn't remember LA being in the middle of a lake. And he says, "Oh, that's LA." And I kept looking, and I couldn't understand why LA was this little tiny city. It was like the Emerald City in the middle of a big lake. Well, it turns out that was smog. And I, in my mind, didn't understand. I was up above the smog, and it was a layer of smog I was looking down on. And it hid the whole city except for the skyscrapers. So I saw what I could imagine would exist while I'm coming from the Midwest and I see lakes, I don't ever see smog like that. So that was my first glimpse of this enchanted land. So I go to stay in a hotel that I researched was a great deal in Hollywood. And of course, I'm going to Hollywood because that's the name that I associated with the movie business. And I was going to work in the movie business. And I pulled into Hollywood late at night, and it looked kind of trashy, but I had made the commitment in my mind I was going to this hotel. I mean, where else was I going to go? This place was huge, and I didn't really know my way around. And back then, we didn't have GPS, so I had used my map and driven there. There was no parking, really. So I parked on the street, and I walked in and asked the guy if I could have a room. And he said, "Yeah, but you can't have a parking spot in the underground parking because we're full. So you'll have to park on the street." And I said, "Well, is that safe?" Because there was what looked like drug addicts and prostitutes walking around. And he said, "You'll be fine as long as you look out your window I would recommend looking out your window every 20 minutes to an hour and just check on your car." So I did what he said. That's the dumbest recommendation. I don't know why he would think that would make a difference. So I go up to my room, and there's no lock on the door. And I was a little disturbed. And I went back down and I asked him why there's no lock on the door. I'm 20, in this land of prostitution and runaways. And I was really vulnerable because I was not street smart at all. And the guy told me, "Well, if you're worried about it, just stack up some cans in front of your door." So with my tiny suitcase with all the things I had in the world except for the writing that I had in the back of my car, I stacked up a couple soda cans in front of the door that I think I found in there that were dirty. And I tried to get some sleep, and I worried if I was getting, flea bit or bed bugs. And I set my alarm, and I kept waking up every half hour and looking out the window. And I don't know what I was supposed to do if I saw anything happening, but alarm would go off, and I'd look out the window, and my car's there, and there's a bunch of people wandering around on the street late at night, a lot of noise, music, loud cars. I go back to sleep for another 30 minutes. I wake up, I check my car over and over for hours and hours. And finally at 3 a.m, I look out the window and all of a sudden I see my car is torn apart. The hood is up. There's papers all over the street blowing around. And, oh, I forgot to mention, like, about 1 a.m, there were prostitutes, like, leaning on my car. And you could tell they were prostitutes because of the way they were dressed and the way they were acting. And they were, like, getting picked up in cars and people smoking and just real riffraffy neighborhood. So at 3, when I finally looked out and I saw all the papers blowing around, that was my diaries from when I was a kid and the story ideas I had written up. So I go down there at 3 a.m. It's a little more deserted now. Really kind of dumb when I'm thinking about it. I mean, anything could have happened to me down there. And I'm picking up all these papers, running across the street, picking up the papers, sticking them in. I can't lock the trunk of my car. So I put them in, but I ended up thinking I'm in a desperate situation. I only had, I don't know if I had like $1,000 or $500 at this point, but that's all I had. And my parents had the philosophy that I would grow up, I was so dependent and innocent as a child. And they just said, here's $1,000, fly, go, be free. That's all you're getting. And figure it out, and I had no clue. So I was kind of desperate and I didn't know what to do. And I decided, well, I'm going to go to the university where people are studying film, where I wanted to go, either USC or I wanted to go to USC. That was a big film school, right? And I just thought, well, maybe there's some student housing or some student assistance or jobs. Maybe I could find a job, you know what I mean? So I went to USC, but little did I know I was not at USC. I was at UCLA. I was so confused. I didn't know there were 2 universities even. I was a little kid, So I'm at UCLA. I find the film school by asking around. God, I had guts. I went to, I think I went to a screening or something, talked to some people. I looked at the bulletin board. They had a bulletin board where they had jobs posted. Somebody said, well, maybe you could, look at the job board or whatever. And, once I had known this girl who was a nanny, and she babysat these kids, and in exchange, she had a house, a room, a guest house. And I thought, wow, if I could find a job like that. And there was one up on the bulletin board. It was a single 12-year-old girl needed like a full-time au pair, and they were looking for a student. Well, I considered myself a student, but I kind of misrepresented myself to this woman because she said, oh, what are you studying? I'm like, oh, film. Where are you? Oh, I'm at UCLA. And she said, okay, come on over for an interview. And I got the job and I got to live there. And I really bonded with this little girl. I really loved her. It's funny. I was always scared of swimming, and this little girl loved swimming. And it kind of taught me to let go and love the water. And her name was Jenna. So her mom it turns out, was a famous actress who was in a big soap opera, which in those days was a very high-paid job with a big following. She had all these fans. I didn't know that. I was just a fan of movies. Well, she kept criticizing me. You're eating. Part of the deal was I could eat the food in the refrigerator, but she kept saying, you're eating too much food. And I was super skinny. I probably looked like a heroin addict. I was so skinny, but still, she was such a cheapskate. She didn't want me to eat any food. And then I'd clean the pots and pans. Part of my job was washing the dishes. And she'd say, you're not getting them clean enough. I want to see my face in them. And then one time I did something this is embarrassing, but I'm thinking I'm just going to admit my truth, right? So I had this car with a broken trunk, right? I did my own oil change and everything, right? I was pretty broke. I can't remember if I had a paying job. Yeah, she was paying me a little bit. So a little tiny bit. And I was in a parking lot getting groceries because that was part of my job. And Jenna was with me, the little girl. And I accidentally pulled forward instead of reverse, and I bumped the car in front of me. And she was like, "Oh, you had an accident." And I looked, and there was this little dent. And I could not afford to be involved in an insurance claim. I could not. I was so poor. And she said, "You're going to leave a note, right?" So this is so bad. I mean, this is the old me, but I wrote a note that was just gibberish and a fake phone number, and I put it on the car, and I left as fast as I could. I was so broke, though. People do desperate things when they're so poor. So I knew she thought I was going to UCLA, but I wasn't smart enough to disappear at the same time every week for my class. I was just writing and trying to make friends and going and hanging out at USC and making friends with students and trying to get like work on a movie, right? And I'd already worked on a few movies in Houston. So all of a sudden one day she says to me, "So what classes did you say you were in again?" And I said, "I'm studying film." And she says, "Well, I can tell you're not a student at UCLA." And she fired me. And she kicked me out on the street, and I had nowhere to go. At this point, I think I had a new job, and I was paying her rent. I was doing temp work, but I don't think that's legal for someone when they're paying you rent for you to just kick them out on the street. She just gave me like 5 minutes notice and said, "You're out of here." And it's true, I lied to her, so it was educational. Well, that was my start in LA. I ended up doing temp work at the movie studios, and I could do filing. I could do typing a little bit. Thank God I knew that. And I worked for an accounting department at Universal Studios, and it was across the street from the studio in this little building, which is now a parking lot. And I was so excited. I got my first movie business job, right? So they said, "At lunchtime, you can go to the commissary." And I'm like, "Are you kidding? I've always heard of this." So they said, "Sure, just walk through the gate, tell them you work here." I mean, the studio was so relaxed back then. If you walked through the gate and acted like you knew it, they'd let you go, especially if you're coming from the accounting building. So, I mean, I used to know all the ways to get on the studio lot. Another trick we used to have is if you have a big envelope full of papers about this thick, it looks like a script, you just drive up and say, "Oh, I'm making a delivery," and they'll just wave you on, right? Times have changed. You can't do that anymore. But I used to bring my friends all the time to go walk around the studio lots at all the different studios because I knew how to get on. So, but this was my first day, and I had brought a little sack lunch, and I remember it was in the 80s. I had one of those ruffled shirts and the wing hair and a big long midi skirt. I looked so dorky, and big fat glasses. I look like such a dork. And I'm walking with my little sack lunch onto the studio lot. And I can't believe it. There's movie stars there and directors, and there's sound stages, and you can look in and see the movie sets. And I'm walking down the street, and there's this guy named Henry Winkler. He used to be the Fonz in Happy Days. He was a director for a while. He was a pretty famous actor. And I immediately recognized him walking toward me on the street. And he had his entourage with him. It was like 4 people. I don't know what they were doing. You know, I don't know what an entourage is usually. Is it like hangers-on, friends, assistants? He's walking toward me. I was so shy. I was so terrified he was going to, I don't know what. I was freaked out. So I wanted to watch him, but I didn't want to turn around and go the other way or anything. He's coming right toward me. So I just darted into a phone booth. And we used to have phone booths in those days. You'd put a quarter in and you'd dial a number, or you'd touchtone the number, and you'd call people in case you're watching this in the year 2000 or later. So I go in this phone booth, and I can't just stand there. So I picked up the phone, but then I put some money in, and I started pretend talking because he's walking closer and closer, and he keeps staring at me. And I was so freaked out. I'm like pretending to talk and being more animated. He stared at me like I was crazy, and he turned and he went the other way. And I was like, God, that's weird that he was staring at me like that. Am I that beautiful? I don't know. I get out of the phone booth and I suddenly realize when I'm looking down at my feet as I'm stepping down from the phone booth, it was up on a pallet. It was a fake phone booth. The whole time I was talking on a fake phone. And he probably recognized that. So, yeah, that was Hollywood anyway. I met a lot of people. I worked for Michael Douglas, who, I don't know, some of these names are older generation names, but Michael Douglas was a big producer. First time I met Mike, hey, don't land on my camera. No. You're going to turn it off, and I won't know how to turn it on again. Okay. Okay, move over. Thank you. God. Come on, bird. Are you tangled up in my hair? So I work for Michael Douglas, and of course, all these famous people are coming in. Kathleen Turner and Danny DeVito and Molly Ringwald. John Travolta came in, and he was totally not popular at that time. He was a has-been. And he was super nice, super courteous to me. And I was just getting him coffee and just a, low-level secretary. And I just really respected that he was so polite and courteous. And, he deserved to have his career take off again. And it did. He then worked with Quentin Tarantino and made some of those movies and became really, really hot again. By the way, Quentin Tarantino. Okay, Michael, I'm going to tell a story. Quentin Tarantino slapped me on the butt. I went and hung out at USC, and Quentin Tarantino was nobody. And he was a student like everybody else at film school, right? And I hung out with this group of guys, and we were going to a screening and going to hear a professor speak, and famous people would come in and talk at USC. It was really great, and I'd just sneak along with them. And one of the friends was Quentin Tarantino, and he just walked up to me and slapped me on the butt. It's like, being a girl, you're not respected in those days at all. I really wanted to write, produce, direct, be taken seriously. I had a lot of opinions, and these chauvinistic guys that I hung out with at USC were just like, I was the cute girl that was the hanger-on, I worked with these guys. They were going to make a movie, and I knew about budgeting, that I worked on movies before, and they hadn't. And I budgeted out the entire movie. They wanted to make it for $100,000. And all the stuff they wanted to do, I told them, you're going to need $150,000 to do this movie. And they didn't like to hear it. So they fired me because they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. And of course, they ended up going to make the movie. I had been considered one of the executive producers. I'd helped them write up the proposal to try to get investors. And but they just dropped me because they didn't like hearing it. I came up with a figure that was exactly what they ended up shooting the film for. But they made the movie. And I was just this meaningless girl, that they left behind. They flew everybody out to their home state and filmed the movie, and they just didn't want anything to do with me. So, because women in those days were not respected, and I was shy. I wasn't ballsy, I wasn't gutsy. So, even at the movie studio I worked for Michael Douglas for a while, and one of the women there was competitive with me and frustrated. She was like, I was getting a lot of attention because my boss wanted to have me help develop movie scripts, and he'd give me the job all the time of writing up notes and seeking new projects. And she didn't like that because she was just an assistant. So she just framed me for all kinds of weird stuff. Like one time somebody stabbed the soap in the kitchen 1,000,000 times. This is so petty, with a knife, and left the knife sticking in it and left it in the kitchen. So then, when one of the executives came in and found it, they're like, who did this? And she said, well, Diana was just in there. It's like weird stuff like that. Women, it was the 80s. I don't know. They just stab you in the back. And then the executives who were women, they were sneaky. Like, I had this Rolodex full of movie stars' phone numbers and producers' phone numbers from Disney when I was with my boss at Disney, and we went to this other studio, this small production company, and the woman executive there had her assistant steal it from my desk and copy it, and they wouldn't return it. So all of a sudden, I don't have any phone numbers for anybody. But I found it in her office, and I took it back. This is the kind of crap that women would do to each other in LA back in the 80s. Oh my God. And then, of course, I was promised our next job, you're going to be a producer. You're going to be an executive vice president, you know? And it went from, I worked at Disney for a while and I was an assistant to, oh, you're going to be an development exec. And so he didn't give me the title officially, but he gave me all the work. Oh man, even at Disney, every Friday I'd get a stack of scripts this big to read. And it was the stack of scripts my boss was supposed to read. And I'd have to do all the work my whole weekend and come in like 6 a.m. on Monday with all the coverage I'd written up. You know, and I never got credit for all that, but I got the experience because meanwhile, there's like a kid who was a guy and they gave him a title and he was doing less work than me. So I don't know what I was doing wrong, but I think it was the times. And also I just didn't know how to play the game, you know? It was frustrating. So I decided I want to be a writer because being a writer, and I always wanted to be a writer, being a writer, you use a pen and piece of paper or a typewriter or a computer and it hardly costs anything. And then you come out with a piece of paper, a stack of papers that's worth $1 million and nobody can argue with it. If it's brilliant, it's brilliant. And that, you know, you own the rights because you wrote it. Little did I know there's tricks in Hollywood to steal that. Like what they'll do is if a new writer comes up with a story and it's really good and they want to steal the script, the way they'll steal it is they'll say, oh, it needs a rewrite. They get some big name writer to do a rewrite on it, change a few little things. And then when it comes time to pay people or to give credit, they'll submit it to the Writers Guild. And the Writers Guild determines who did the most work on this script. And they're all made up of these old Hollywood guys that are all buddies. And they'll just say, oh, the ghostwriter did most of the work. It really wasn't her. So, you know, then he gets the credit. I don't even get a credit on the movie. And he gets all the money. I don't get the bonuses or anything. That's how they steal stuff in Hollywood. And it's pretty prevalent. Well, when I was in Hollywood, I thought, I wanted to be an actress. So I was working my way toward that and I was so shy. It was so painful. But I took all these acting classes. I got real bold with my work and like, okay, now I got to come up with the courage to go get an agent and start trying to get work. And then I met this millionaire who was a happy-go-lucky, wealthy, jet-setting special effects guy. He had a studio. It was fun. I was like, you know, I always wanted to be a mother too, and I thought it was too late, and now I'm just going to quit and be a mom. So I did that, and I'm glad I did. I have the most beautiful children. I'm so proud of them, and having kids is the greatest spiritual experience you could ever encounter in your lifetime. And, you know, it made me blossom as a psychic too. Getting pregnant, all of a sudden, it's like a veil was lifted. I could just see so much more. And you know, when you get in the elevator with somebody, you can just tell by the way they're standing if they're a parent or not. Just the tension in their body. You could just tell who's a parent and who's not. It's just this wisdom. You trade looks and you just know they're patient, they're wise, they've gone through it, you know. And I think I want to end this episode and just say, I'll continue next time, but I just want to say that when you have tough experiences, they toughen you up into a more spiritually open person. So I feel every negative thing that's ever happened to me is empowering. And that's kind of the thought I want to leave on this episode. And then next episode, I will tell about some more of the crazy stuff that happened in LA, and then like how it kind of degenerated. So I'll talk to you next time.